Hi, Sai, and Sai here from MusicRadar. Today we are checking out not one, but multiple machines because this is the Gear of the Year.
It's our Gear of the Year roundup.
Yeah.
It is the end of 2024. We have looked at lots of cool instruments this year. And so we are here to give you a quick roundup of our top 10 synths, drum machines, samplers, top 10 instruments, cool new hardware from 2024. So what we're not talking about today, we are not going to talk about any software.
Nope.
We'll keep that as a separate thing. We're not going to talk about any Eurorack thing. There's a whole world of modules that we're not going to go into.
Yeah.
Loads of studio gear, things like interfaces and monitors and things like that. We are going to stick to purely instruments, the cool sound-making things that we've had fun with in 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get into it.
Let's get into our top 10. Before we kick off, let's talk about some things that haven't made the top 10.
Okay.
Or some some kind of omissions or some things that we're not including.
Okay.
Obviously, there's been loads and loads of really cool stuff released this year.
Yes.
And we haven't got space to talk about all of them. So there's a few things that aren't making the cut. It's worth flagging firstly one thing, which is UDO Super Gemini, because I already know this is going to be in the comments section.
Yeah. Where is it?
But for the record, we reviewed that at the end of last year, and that was MusicRadar's Synth of the Year 2023.
Yeah.
So it's not in this year.
So we'd love to do it twice.
It's great. It's brilliant.
It's not fair.
But we've given them enough praise, so they're not in this year.
Yeah.
There's also been some brands like Korg and Moog and Electron, lots of brands who brought out a ton of, or kind of at least more than one cool and interesting things. So for the most part, we've tried to stick to one thing per brand. There's a couple of exceptions to that. But that does mean we've kind of made some decisions to include some things from some brands and some things from others. Certain things haven't made the cut, like, for example, Moog Labyrinth, which was a really cool, fun little semi-modular synth that does some really interesting generative things. We really liked it. It's not in our top 10.
And you'll know why in a bit, because we'll reveal as to why.
But also, let's talk about what we're rating these things on. So everything that we've tried this year, we have looked for things that are innovative, things that are good value, things that do things that rival bits of gear don't. But of course, a big part of this is it's just subjective.
Yes.
These are kind of just things that we like.
Yeah.
So
we had to play with them. We loved them, basically.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously, as with any of these things, opinions may vary. Your favourite thing from this year might not be in this list. If it isn't, let us know in the comments section. We're really interested to know what other people have been using, what other people have been liking, and anything you disagree with on in our top 10. So in at number 10 in our Gear of the Year list is...
It's the Teo 5.
Teo or Teio. We should have worked this out at this point, but yeah.
Teo.
What is it?
Well, basically, this is Sequential's Oberheim, essentially. So, do you remember they did the Take 5?
Yep.
They've done another one, exactly the same box, and they've put an Oberheim in it. So it's basically what an OBXA.
So it's kind of more affordable. It's kind of cheaper than kind of the top end Oberheims. It's got a bit of sequential flavour. It's also kind of a little bit Focusrite because Focusrite Innovation who now own Sequential and have been involved.
A bit of everything. It's all going on. We loved how hands-on it is. It's such a great machine. The way the kind of oscillators and filters are, you can get stuck into that stuff. Really good. The form factor really feels like it's good for performance, but it's a bit on the heavy side. So gigging wise, it feels like, it's quite heavy. I don't know if I want to be gigging with it, but it's still quite compact. So it's like a compact poly.
And it's still, the price is like pretty good for an Oberheim thing, and it's compared to it, but it's still, for a 5-voice synth, it's still kind of at the top, top end of what you get for that. So it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but it hits a nice price point.
It's the Oberheim pad sounds. That's what you want.
And that's why it's in our top 10.
It's in our top 10 for that reason, yeah. So, in at number 9, Si?
Is Electron's Digitact 2. So Digitact, the original arrived in 2017, and it is one of the kind of probably more popular and more influential bits of kit from the last few years. It is a sampling drum machine, so it's a little bit of a sampler in that it can sample, it has sample engines. Yeah. It's kind of a bit of a drum machine in the way the sequencer works, but kind of fits between these two worlds a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, Electron have brought out a sequel, and this expands on what it can do exponentially. So the original had 8 mono voices. This has 16 stereo voices.
Yeah,
so
improved every way.
A whole load more.
Yeah.
You've got twice as many sequencer steps. You've got new filter modes, like a really cool new comb filter, and a great new Euclidean sequencer mode. So there's a lot of cool stuff that we can do. Like that. And that's what we really like about it. It basically doubles down on everything that was really fun about the original Digitact.
Yeah.
In that you can do sample-based beats, you can do cool little one-shot sample manipulating. The sequence is really powerful. You can send that sequencer to different MIDI devices. What I would say is the kind of only real downside to it compared to some other things in this roundup is that, like, although it expands on what the Digitact could do, it doesn't really change anything fundamental about the Digitact. So I think there was a lot of people who never quite got on with that kind of Electron workflow or the way it works. And I think if you were someone who kind of doubted the original or didn't get on with the original, there's probably not anything in this one that's fundamentally going to change your opinion on that.
Okay.
But for our money, it's a great bit of kit.
Still worth being on this list.
It's definitely worth being on our list here.
Brilliant. Okay, Si, another one from you. It's number 8, and it's
the PWM Mantis.
Right.
So PWM is a relatively new British company. You might know them from Malevolent that they brought out a couple of years ago, which was a cool new semi-modular synth. Mantis is their second product. And so this was designed in collaboration with the kind of legendary synth designer Chris Huggett, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago.
Of course, his soul.
Who was responsible for a ton of classic synthesizers, but notably in this case, you've got the Wasp and the Oscar, which are two brilliant kind of old, very characterful synths.
Legends.
Yep, and the Mantis is kind of an update to these. So it has a very similar, it's got a hybrid synth engine, it's paraphonic synth, and it's got a filter based around those found in the Oscars.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
And so what we really like is that it's a really nice tribute both to Chris as a designer and to those classic synths. And it kind of nails the character of those sounds, but in a modern format. The build quality is really good, the sound is really characterful, and there's a lot to really like about it as a synth. There's not that many downsides to it as a synth. The couple I would say is that firstly, it's a paraphonic synth and at a price point over $1,000. It's quite pricey for the amount of voices you get, but that is kind of what you get with a nice quality synth like that. I also find that the layout of it, because every control is basically the same size, it can be a little bit fiddly to navigate.
Yeah,
but these are kind of very minor downsides on what is a really nice, characterful and well-designed synth, and very much deserving of being in our Gear of the Year list.
Another one from you, size number 7. It is
Ableton Move. Yeah, we have it in front of us here because it's one of the smaller things that we can actually have on our table today.
Yep.
Ableton Move. So this arrived a few months ago. It kind of looks a little bit like a mini version of Push.
Yeah.
Actually, in reality, it's closer to being a hardware version of Ableton Note, which is their kind of Sketchpad iOS app.
And it's not just a controller.
It's a standalone instrument, but it's very much a Sketchpad for live. So you've got 4 tracks that can make use of drums and some of the synths that you find in Ableton Live. And you can kind of put together these kind of little track sketches and take those to work in Ableton Live and finish this off.
Yeah.
What I really like about this is it's beyond being its standalone things. It's a really handy little controller for live that you can take out and about with you. I think it's well priced for what it is. And its integration with Ableton Live is really nice. There's a really smooth workflow from being able to sample within it. You can kind of sample directly into the unit. You can build little track ideas, little sketches, and quite easily just take those into live and finish them off.
Yeah.
There are downsides in that I think the workflow of this is quite specific and it really won't suit everyone. And if you look at the responses got online, there's clearly some people who think it's brilliant, some people who just don't understand why you would possibly want it. And it's kind of, I think, a bit of a Marmite product in that sense.
Yeah.
I think to really get the most out of it, you need to embrace its limitations and kind of work around them. But in all honesty, it's not going to suit everyone's workflow and it's not going to suit the way that every Ableton Live user works.
Sure.
And so for that reason, it's not a must-buy for everyone, but it is also a really excellent and nicely designed bit of kit and deserving of being in this top 10.
Okay.
Number 6.
Number 6 is the Korg Multi-Poly.
So this is what we've chosen from Korg this year. Out of a lot
one.
of things that they released,
Yeah.
but this is probably our favourite. And
It
why?
is, after the little misfire of the Korg Neo, this was their next, that sort of,
Digital synth.
yeah, their sort of 37 key chassis that they have.
Now Korg call this a analog modelling synth, which I still dispute as a description, because it does have analog modelling, but you've also got wavetable and wave shape in it. So it can
analog
do a lot
modelling
more
makes
than
you
that.
think virtual analog, and that kind of pigeonholes it into a certain sort of aspect. And we it's not that. It's
We
a bit
think
more
that's
than
underselling
that.
it, don't we? Yeah.
And I get why they use multi-poly, the mono-poly moniker, because of the round robin sequencing thing. It kind of misses a little bit out on the kind of ease and quick, hands-on sequencing that had of the original.
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't sound like the original.
It can kind of sound like a
Little bit,
monopoly if you want, but
but
it's not a virtual monopoly.
No, it's not. It's not a virtual monopoly. It's its own thing. And what Korg have done, which is a great idea, and what they do with all these little 37 keys synths, is they're borrowing bits of, ideas from, the past, the back catalogue. And they're bringing, new instruments that are, doing great things. So we like it for that reason.
And what we're saying is basically forget about any links to the monopoly, forget about the idea that it's supposedly analog modelling. It does a lot more than that. It's really deep. And actually, for the money, there's a lot of synth going on in there.
It's a lot, yeah. Compared to a lot of the other ones, I think it might be my favourite of that crew. I know it's not yours, but I think it's my one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's our number 6.
That's number 6.
All right, we're into the top 5. In at 5, our 5th favourite instrument this year
is the Moog Muse, and that's why the Labyrinth isn't on it, because we had to pick one, didn't we?
We've picked one.
One Moog, and it's too big to miss. Huge. It's the first big poly they've come out with since the whole, buy in music.
Yeah, well, they had the Moog 1 a few years ago, which was a really kind of massive top-end thing, but it's something that we didn't have. Like, people like us, we don't have space or money for that.
No.
But the Moog Muse is more attainable. It's a bit more convenient.
Yeah.
And it really kind of is exactly what you want for my money of Moog polysynth. It's got like the proper characterful, gritty analog sound. Like, what I really like about it is even in its kind of most vanilla, there's character to those oscillators and there's character to those filters. and that it kind of gives it a little bit of an edge.
Yeah.
Sonically.
It's unmistakably Moog. Even despite all the music stuff, it's still very Moog. Yeah.
One thing I really like about it is its digital delay, which is kind of modelled on some classic digital rack delays. It can kind of do lower sample rate delay lines. Just sounds really, really nice.
It does sound
it's
nice.
really fun to get hands on with.
But it's the only effect on board, isn't it?
It is the only effect on board, and given the price point of Muse compared to some of the other synths on the market, you will get more versatility elsewhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't have poly aftertouch.
No, that's a big problem for the price point, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, if you want that Moog sound in a poly synth, it absolutely nails that. But if you want something a bit broader, you can probably spend your money a bit better elsewhere.
Yeah. But it's the big Moog.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's definitely
And
worthy.
that's why it's in the top 5.
Yeah. Okay, so in at 4 is
the P6. It's the smallest and cheapest thing in our Gear of the Year roundup, coming in well under £200, $200. The P6 is a little compact sampler, so it's part of Roland's IRA compact range, which are these like really small, convenient, compact little digital music makers. It's kind of their version of Volca, a little bit smaller, a little bit fiddlier in some ways.
But actual buttons as opposed to little
but these, of the whole range, this is definitely my favourite. So what it is a 6-voice sampler. It can do polyphonic and stereo sampling really easily, really quickly. It's got a little granular sampler on it. It's got these fun little effects. So you've got, the scatter effect that Roland like. You've got delay. You've got filter. It's, for what it is and for the size, it's a lot of fun and there's a lot of creative power in there. I will say it's a bit fiddly, and there are features that I would like. I'd like more routing of the effects, and maybe a few more options in what you can do with kind of editing samples. But bearing in mind the price point, those are all kind of things that are forgettable. And I find Roland have put out a lot of gear in the last few years, and some of it's a bit hit and miss, but when they hit, I think they really nail it. And this is one of the things that they've done where it's like, for the price, this is really fun, really enjoyable, and it's something I would highly recommend people picking up.
I like the fact it's not obviously them dining out on past glories, as it were. This is
it's not
a bit newer.
Unlike some of the other IRA compacts,
808s, all that
it's not just regurgitating the same sounds, and it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool.
Into the top 3.
Yeah.
At number 3 is...
Wow, it's the Polyend synths. Now, big news is the fact that you nearly touted this to be the best of the year. In your review...
And it is within the top 3, to be fair.
Okay.
I'm putting it in the top 3. I really like synth, despite being the most kind of simple and basic named instrument this year.
Yeah.
I really like synth. It's got all of these different digital synth engines that do a mixture of things like FM and wavetable and physical modelling, all within one really nicely designed bit of hardware. So it's got this nice playing grid that will do kind of poly aftertouch thing, and you can play 3 synths at once. You can trigger chords.
Love that.
You can follow those chords.
And you can map it all out differently, can't you?
Yeah, it's got some nice effects on it. It's just a really nicely designed synth, and it's got some really fantastic sounds on it. Now, there are a couple of things holding this back from being perhaps at the top spot.
Which maybe an update could maybe.
Yeah, I mean, so for one thing, it is 8 voices for a multi-timbral synth, which for a digital synth in this day and age isn't masses.
Yeah.
I personally don't really think that's that much of a problem because of the way you interact with it and because of the way you can kind of layer sounds. I actually find that those 8 voices are kind of enough for like what it does and the way that you use it. I mean, if you were going to plug an external controller or feed it MIDI, you might end up wanting more voices than that. And obviously for the price, which is kind of around the kind of 400-500 mark, you can get digital synths with considerable bigger polyphony.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would say about it is that it's a little bit too easy sometimes to overload the CPU because it's got these quite complicated digital synth engines in there, and depending on how you pair those, you can hit the upper limits of what it's capable of quite easy, and it gets a little bit glitchy. Hopefully, firmware updates will sort that out.
Hopefully.
And it's not a massive problem, but it's just something to be aware of. And I think those are the 2 things that are keeping it just shy of our top spot this year.
Okay.
But it's very much worth being in the top 3.
It does sound awesome.
And it's one of the most interesting and nicely designed bits of hardware that I've tried this year, definitely.
Ditto. Yeah, I love that one.
At number 2 of 2024.
Whoa, now we're getting to the thick end of it, or the thin end. It's Arturo's Polybrute
12, yep.
Now, it's what's basically kicked Astrolab off the list for me, because I loved Astrolab, and we couldn't have it on this list because Polybrute 12 is just too epic. Well, it's so epic, isn't it, Si?
I absolutely love Polybrute 12. So I loved the original Polybrute that came out a few years ago. But one thing you could say about the original Polybrute is that it is a 6-voice synth, and the Polybrute puts this real emphasis on being able to morph between sounds and real expression. And 6 voices, you could quite easily hit that upper limit of the voice count. Whereas with the 12, you get obviously so much more.
Double.
But it also really doubles down on that expressiveness. So the original already had these interesting ways to control it. So it has like a ribbon controller, this kind of morphy, multi-dimensional controller.
That's cool.
But what they've added for the Polybrute 12 is a genuinely really interesting take on aftertouch, polyphonic aftertouch. So you've got straightforward poly aftertouch, but you've also got these kind of different ways that you can use the release and the aftertouch to map to different elements of the sound. And for my money, it's probably the most expressive keybed that I've tried in recent years. But I just find the synth engine really nice. It pairs the best of the kind of analog grit of some of Arturio's analog things with the digital effects that you will find in things like pigments and things like that. And it's just an all-round really fantastic, really modern sounding synth. If it wasn't so, you can do a lot.
Bleeding large and heavy.
Yeah, our only criticisms are really the size and the price. I mean, not that I would say it's overpriced, but it comes in at a price point that puts it at the top end, and that's probably the one thing knocking it off our top spot.
Okay, so this is it, Si. We have come down to what is our favourite bit of gear of the year 2024. Drum roll.
Electron Digitone 2. So we are calling this our 2024 piece of gear of the year, our best instrument of the year. Why, I hear you ask?
Why?
Because I loved the original Digitone. The original Digitone was a really nicely designed FM synth. And the original was multi-timbral. You had these 4 FM synth engines within one box. And much like the Digitac that we were talking earlier, Electron have released a sequel that kind of massively doubles down on the capabilities. So like Digitact, you've got a real expansion of the audio capabilities. So the original was 8 voice polyphonic with 4 synth engines. And this one is now 16 voice. And you've got 16 individual channels, so you can have 16 different sounds going on.
Yeah. Awesome.
Which really expands what you can do. However, what sets this apart from Digitact, which obviously we put at number 10, is that whereas Digitact is kind of an expansion on the original that just sort of adds things, upgrades
this feels new.
This really not only upgrades what was there, but adds like a ton of extra stuff. So the original Digitone was an FM synth with 4 layers of FM synth engine.
Yeah.
But you've got much more than this going on here. So you have got that original FM synth, which is still there, you can still use. But you've also got a new FM drum engine. And actually, the original Digitone I loved for creating percussion anyway, because like if you've never tried it, FM synthesis is amazing for drum synthesis. It makes really hard-hitting kicks, great metallic percussion. And now you've got this dedicated drum synth that you can use alongside the FM synth. You've also got 2 new other synth engines which kind of bring an element of sort of virtual analog and subtractive synthesis into the mix.
Brings that kind of hybrid aspect to it again,
so you've got 16 tracks and you can make use of these different machines, as they're called, on all these different tracks, which just really expands what you can do. And so rather than, unlike the Digitact, which felt like it was a just a kind of beefed up version of the original, this feels like a whole new instrument that turns the original's multi-timbral synth into a almost kind of DAW in a box level thing, where you can do drums, you can do synths, you've got extra effects, you've got the cone filters that have been added to other Electron things, you've got the Euclidean sequencing,
proper value for money, right?
Sequencer. And for a price point kind of just shy of £1,000, you really do get a lot of power, and there's a lot you can do, and you can kind of create, it feels like something that now you can create full finished songs, and I absolutely really love it. Now, it's worth saying that obviously opinions may well differ. There are obviously, this is entirely digital. There are people who will miss having some sort of analog capabilities. There are people who will miss the sampling. Like, you know, for the similar price, you can pick up actual kind of, you know, maybe your MPCs or your kind of things like that, which will combine elements of synthesis and elements of sampling. And it's also worth saying that this is all within a classic Electron design with an Electron sequencer, which is incredibly powerful. You can do loads, but also if you're someone who does not like to read the manual, you're not going to get on with it. Like, to unlock the full powers of this, you will need to set aside a couple of days to read through the manual at least once, if not twice.
If you're a first-time Electron user,
and start making kind of, you know, making notes about deep features hidden within the workflow. I think that's
that adds to the longevity.
It adds to the longevity, but you know, it's not going to be for everyone.
Not for everyone.
But for my money,
but it's for you, which is why you stuck at number 1.
And this is why it is our number 1 piece of gear from 2024.
You might not agree with everything we've added to our list here.
You might not agree with any of it.
Please let us know in the comments. We'd love to see your views on this wildly subjective subject.
Yeah, what have you been using this year? What have you loved? What are you looking forward to next year? What have we missed out on?
Yeah, definitely
tell us everything.
Tell us all that.
We want to know it all.
And we'll try and, answer all the questions at some point. But until then, have a lovely end of the year.
And we'll see you in 2025.
2025, yeah. So until then, goodbye.
Thanks.